presentation that I gave in Paris. You know a lot of these slides, so I'm not going to explain the content of the slide. I'm going to talk about, and this is just going to be very short, to give you some ideas of how to make a better presentation with slides. In other words, I'm going to explain my logic for why I chose the images I did and why these things are here. I'm not going to tell you so much what the content is. You already have seen it. Okay? Understand? Okay. Every year I have to talk to my think tank and I have to make a presentation. And so I always try and mix up images for them. So the first thing that I always try and do, and this is my own technique, but I give you this trick to use for your own things, is I always like to use a little bit of classicism, classical images. Like this is Vermeer. See, I'm trying to make a visual pun. Forgotten. Like here's somebody reading a letter, maybe remembering. So I always try and use classical art to make a statement. So we live in a modern era with lots of modern synthetic images. Quite often, I'll begin with a quote. I'll begin with a quote that tells people something about an idea that's being expressed. This particular one says that brands, in the traditional sense, are not as important. And then I did a trick. There's a visual presentation trick. Watch what happens here, from slide to slide. Like you saw Sascha showing how the first line of the slide was close. You see? Went from a color to black and white so that this is just an idea of animation. Yeah? Another trick is not to use too many big words or a lot of words on a slide. Go for a smaller phrase or just some big encapsulating statement and talk about it. Let you, the presenter, talk about the picture rather than reading off a slide. You see? So that it becomes you as the vehicle that everyone's attention is focused on. This one also doesn't have words. So this is just familiar things. People see things that they recognize so that you can make a point symbolically without actually saying what it is. You saw Sascha do that very effectively. Here, I use a picture to explain a concept, the cloud. We all know what the cloud is? Yeah? Okay. Again, few words, interesting picture. Often we'll use a news photograph or an image where people can understand something about a current event to illustrate. This one was illustrating, you remember, the idea of the challenges of intellectual property in the internet, in cyberspace. Sometimes I'll introduce a concept, a large word, and then some smaller points to try and give a new piece of terminology. In other words, a new word has been created that people may not know. So that's another trick. Give them something they haven't seen. Then, this is a popular image. This is popular culture. So, and it's always good to give a little shock. It's always good to surprise people a little bit or to try and do something a little bit controversial. This is controversial. Then this is jokes. This is making a joke. This is using one slide after the other to talk about a joke. Remember I said, this is what they want you to think customer service is, but this is the reality of the customer service. And this is where this person works, and this is your relationship with customer service. So this is a joke. And it's a joke developed in 4 frames. This is what they want you to think. This is what it really is. This is where the person works. This is what your relationship is. And big laugh. So try and put a joke in if you can. It's always good. This is just a familiar symbol. This is talking about service and that Disney has a reputation for the best customer service. But it's an idea of using a popular image that everyone can understand. Now this is developing an idea over a series of slides about the idea of cultures. We're now beginning to offer same-day delivery service in the product universe. So I talk about the American mail system, and then about mailbox home delivery, and then United Parcel home delivery. And see here I'm using historical photography, not modern photography, vintage photography to make my point. And then finally, something very ugly, which is modern stock photography. This is like in such bad taste, but it makes the point about home delivery. And now here, the next slide, using irony, I say, but some cultures already have some same-day delivery, and this is reality. So this uses photography to develop a concept. Now, over 4 or 5 slides. More news photography, generic photography, using a big logo to reference a brand, using a recognizable person to make a point. And you see also this, between this and this, there's a kind of an irony between the 2 slides about who's using the tablet. Then, sometimes I use an illustration where I say, maybe the world is in crisis. It's a bit like a comet hitting the Earth. This is very dramatic. This actually is a movie illustration. But people remember the point if you make a representational slide that reflects on the concept. The same here again, classical illustration. Remember I talked about how the internet was the Tower of Babel. A celebrity, Mrs. Obama, talking about literacy and new literacy. See, I make the point about that we really are, the way that we read changes in the world. And now I go back to petroglyphs, where I'm talking about reading from this to this. They're both about literacy. So this is again this idea of contrast and irony. Then this uses popular symbols to kind of illustrate a point about popular media. But see, logos are very powerful and very important. And you can talk over them about what your ideas are. Then here's a title slide. Now I'm shifting gears. I'm going into a new part of my presentation. So I put up a new slide just to say to people, okay, new section of the presentation. This is more, now see, and this is the most boring type of slide you can show, just words. So you have to be prepared to make this come alive in some way. The way you can make it come alive is by a joke or something. Something has got to be extraordinary because this is dull. And you don't want someone standing up and simply reading you words off the screen. You want to communicate an idea with every slide. You saw this slide, and this is a slide that summarizes, remember, luxury brand strategy in Asia. 2 luxury brands approaching the same market. So this is a slide purely informational. This is a slide that, another big logo. This is about brand acquisition, about how much a brand is worth today. Here's a legacy brand. Then this is the section about personalities. This is interesting because people like to recognize pictures. They like to recognize people. And also I'm making a joke. Here I don't even tell you his last name. See, here, I guess I do give the name, but here I don't even tell you his last name. That's Lance Armstrong. And then here I don't even say, I say, what's her name? This is a joke. But then I talk about her role as a data aggregator. You remember that? Here, this is a slide about contrast. When Simon Patterson visits us the first week of June, he and I are going to talk about the American Airlines rebranding to you. And now you're beginning to see some sense of how this slide presentation can be made interesting. This one we all know. This is talking about a brand that died. And so I thought it was very interesting to show a vintage image rather than something clean and squeaky clean. Also, look at how big these images are in the frame. I hope some of you will work on this one. This should be a lot of fun. Redesigning junk food. Then here's another title slide. See, here I'm trying to talk about this. And then, of course, here you remember, I merely showed you the picture. I did not even have a name. And I didn't even say her name until last. I said things about the picture that were interesting to you. Here on this one, when I showed this slide, what did I do? I did the dance step for you. I danced for you. And it's a trick. It's a trick to get your attention and to make you remember, but it also made an informational point. And then for this is dramatic. This is like drama. I chose the image because it has a visceral, emotional reaction. And notice too, you're not seeing a lot of words. You're seeing big pictures, and I talk over the picture. And then here, a way in which to emphasize really what the whole point is. It tracks you back to the first slide. It tracks you back to the first picture you saw of the woman with the letter, and it was called But Not Forgotten. So I say, what's forgotten? Remember, there's got to be continuity from the beginning to the end of a presentation. Then, a popular image that everyone, at least in your generation, will recognize. Somewhere you know the origin of this, and you understand the concept. Even if there weren't the words, you begin to get the sense of the picture. And finally, at the end, another person with another leather, but facing the opposite direction. So that, let's see, how do you do this? No. I'm trying to get back to the front. There, you can see that from the beginning to the end, the character shift. Okay? So these are tricks about how to do a presentation. And when you create your own presentation, try and remember some of these ideas and try and apply them. Because it's very interesting to make these things a progression. You're giving a progression of ideas, and you're trying to make it interesting so that people remember. In summary, not too many words. Try and make a joke. Help people to remember a point by doing a dance or making a historical picture. Give a little bit of variety, because people get bored very quickly in these presentations. So you have to always be throwing something new at them to stimulate the mind and the eye. All right. So much. Anybody want to ask any questions about that? Anything? Questions about presentation? All right. Well, later I'll talk to you about other ways in which to make a lively presentation. So, Nick Roylance has come to us from London. Apropos to Sascha's presentation, the rock and roll star, John Lennon, who was from a group called the Beatles, got into a lot of trouble one year when he said, "We're more popular than Jesus." It was quite a controversial remark. So your first presenter today talked about the Jesus brand. Your second presenter today is going to show you artisan books, printed in limited edition, that come from the universe of popular music. It is very interesting work, and you should feel free to ask me questions after this is over. So I now present to you Nick Roylance from London. You want to just get full screen again?
Okay, hi. Hi. Nice to meet you all. I'm probably not going to do any dancing today. My name is Nick, as Stanley said, and I'm from a book publishers. And what I'd like to talk to you a little bit about is how your work as designers helps a company like mine to communicate our message, not just to our customers, but to all of our partners, all of our stakeholders. Have you heard that word, stakeholders? It's like anyone who's got an interest in the company, right? I'd like to talk a little bit about how your work helps us to tell our story. So I've recently been thinking about businesses as stories. And when you think about a company's strategy, who it is and what it's trying to do and why, it's kind of like storytelling. We're creating this strategy, but it's kind of like a story. And your role as a designer is to help us communicate that. And I'm not the only person to think about this idea. This is a British business writer called Gail Ringland. And she's saying you need only think about an organization's brand, you we should start to think about some of its story, like when we were thinking about Apple and it's based in California, and all these associations you have with Steve Jobs, or whatever, you start to think about the brand and its story. So my own business is a book publisher's. So it's really cool to be here in Verona. I was just reading like 500 years ago, there are already 1,000 print presses and book publishers here in this region of Italy, like 3,000 in Italy at that time. So it's the beginning of this information revolution here in Europe. Okay. So it's a family-owned company, and here in this slide, this is like in the centre here, we've got this British artist called Peter Blake. He designed a lot of album covers, like the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper album cover. This is a singer, Brian Wilson of the 60s band The Beach Boys. They're not in our family, okay? It's not like my uncle Brian or anything. But on this side is my sister, and she's the art director, and she has a master's in design, so it's kind of, she comes at it from a slightly more design point of view, which thinking a lot about some of the stuff that Sascha was saying today about typography. And I have a master's in business, and we sort of cross over a little bit in how we work together. But when you're thinking about a small company, some of these issues about the brand and about who we are and what we're going to do as a company become quite personal, and it's about perhaps maybe knowing who you are as people and knowing what it is you want to achieve. So what we do is we make limited edition books. So this is a recent book with Eric Clapton, the guitarist, so I don't know if you know, but we maybe only make 2 or 3 new books a year, so it's not mass market publishing. It's not like 100 books this spring and 100 books this autumn. It's 2 or 3 books a year. We maybe spend 2 or 3 years working on each book. I don't think it's that we're lazy. It's more like we're spending a lot of time thinking about the design, a lot of time thinking about the production, and just taking a lot of care with the book, because when we publish a book, we only make 2,000 copies, and that's it. When it's finished, it's sold, it's gone. So we only get one chance to do it. So we really spend a lot of time. So if we're thinking about something like the identity of this book, it's copying, you know, like the spray paint.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Can you speak slowly? Because we
Yeah. And if you want me to repeat anything, please, like, just say. So the book's identity here is like it's spray painted onto the book, you know, in the same way as one of Eric Clapton's cases that he keeps his guitars in. And so it's reflecting something about him, you know, his brand.
You actually spray painted the letters onto the book jacket through a stencil?
Yeah, well, yeah. Now, I said to my sister, we can use Photoshop, you know. That's what a computer is great for. And she said, no, like, let's get a guitar, let's get 6 or 7 guitar cases here, we'll spray paint them, because something will happen, there'll be an accident. Something will, when we do it for real, it'll be more interesting. And maybe we'll get some sort of happy accident, you know. So that's what we did. And then we photographed the case to make the design.
Do you see what's happening here? This is something about the publisher encouraging the invention of the presentation of the book. It's the publisher becoming an artist, a party to the creation of the art. These are very, very limited books. Only 2,000 copies are made. When they're sold, gone. And he only does 3 titles a year. So this is a very, very rare and precious object that they make.
So every book has an author. And when we work with our author, it's kind of like when you're working as a designer with your client, it's a similar kind of process. Because what we do is we try to, 1, ask them a lot of questions and find out about how they see themselves. And 2, we really try and open our minds and think, how do they see the world? How do they want to be portrayed? And 3, we try and propose a way that we're going to do that for them. So we say, look, we're going to make a book like this. And they may say that idea sucks, you know, come back with me with something else. So normally we take 3 ideas, you know. And then it develops over the course of a year. We work together. You really have to listen to your client. But this time it's Eric Clapton, but next time it's Lou Reed. I don't know if you know, he's the 60s musician. Or Yoko Ono is the next. And they all have a very different story to tell. So each time you're getting to meet someone new and start again.
Are you following this, everyone? Okay.
But it's not just about the author. I mean, there's all these other stakeholders involved. And they all help tell the story. So it's not just the author, it's the readers. They're really important, the people who buy the books. It's our staff, it's our printers and our binders who are based here in Italy. It's our booksellers in Australia or America, or the media that review our books, whether it's GQ magazine or Vogue. They're all involved in telling the story. So it's very difficult to say where the brand starts and finishes, because all of these people are involved. So as I said, our company uses a printer and binder based here in Italy. It's 100 years old, owned by 2 brothers, Nicola and Giuseppe. And we like working with them because they love to do creative things. You know, they like a challenge. And we always like to try something new and different with every book. So this is Jimmy Page. He's a guitarist, you know, about Led Zeppelin. And when we came to do his book, we bound it in plastic and leather. So we need a really good bookbinder that's happy to try something new. They've never done that before. But Nicola and Giuseppe, that's fun for them. You know. And then when the book is finished, it goes out into the world, and maybe the author's brand, like David Bowie, his book is presented here in Paul Smith, menswear in New York. And their brand matches David Bowie's. You know, they liked something about his colour, his sense of style. They thought, yeah, that goes with what we do. You know, it matches who we are as Paul Smith. They didn't have the Jimmy Page book there. They weren't interested in that book. But David Bowie, they thought, yes, that fits with our fashion. You know? So your work as designers, or the designers we work with, ends up not just on the cover of the book, but in storefronts like this in Los Angeles, or in magazines. It travels very far. So the firm was started by my father. His name is Brian, and he founded the company when he was kind of about your age now, in his 20s. He was really bored in what he was doing. I don't know if you can relate to that. But he wanted to try something new, and he wanted to do something different. So he went to the British Library in London, and just to see what ideas he could have. And what he fell in love with there was these really old, beautiful manuscripts. Historical manuscripts that were beautifully presented like this, in leather bound, and they lasted for hundreds of years. And he thought this, you know, such a special way to present the story. And whether it's something that happened like a couple of hundred years ago, we still have something today to hold in our hands. Soon after, he became friends with George Harrison, the guitarist of the Beatles. And what he said to George, or what George and he discussed, was this idea of presenting George's song lyrics in a similar kind of way, as if they were a historical document. And this was like such a strange thing to do at that time, because everyone would have expected this book to be, you know, paperback, $9. And instead, they only made 1,000 books, and they sold out like that. They were gone very fast. So that today, we're continuing to work with all different musicians. David Bowie was this recent example of an author last year. And what I wanted to show you was how the design of the book, the colour scheme, is influenced by these 2 shots of David And it references these. And so it's about making associations, like Stanley was saying, about connoting or denoting an association with these photos. And David chose the fabric. And I love this mirror that's, this design element was the mirror. But again, my sister is the designer, said we should put a mirror in the front of the book. And as the business person, I think, how are we going to pay for this? But I think it's a fabulous design statement because it says something about David Bowie and his changing image. It's very different to Jimmy's book, Jimmy Page. His book is really dark and kind of mysterious, and he has this rock image, and that suits him. You know, he has such a strong personal identity, even has his own logo, and his book really expresses who he is. So that now we've made like 100 books since 1974, and I guess they say something about who we are as publishers, the choices of books that we publish and the ones we don't.
Hey, you guys, come on, come back. Come on.
Sorry, is it loud enough? Can you hear? But up until 2008, none of these books had a Genesis brand on them. There was no logo. It was, sometimes we had our type in Garamond, sometimes it was in Gill Sands, always different. And we decided we need an identity, a signature to put on our own work.
Because?
Well, we thought about this for a long while because there was something quite powerful about the books not being branded. Because people knew who we were and they knew about our work, but it was almost like a speakeasy or a club where you had to know about it. And people told their friends, hey, you should get this book, you know. And that was quite a powerful way of us, of becoming known. But in 2008, 2009, as I was saying to Sascha, there was more competition and more people making books like ours. And we felt we had to begin to develop our own identity. Now, I don't know if that was a good decision. It'd be interesting to hear what you think. You might say, no, we should have left it, okay? But we decided we did want a logo. Don't try to read this. I can email it around if you're interested. What it's saying is all these different stakeholders, booksellers, authors, readers, they all say something different about the Genesis brand. And they all have a different association of what this brand is. It's like our bookseller says, one of our booksellers, he says, Genesis is like an English coat I bought 10 years ago. It's well tailored and it fits well, you know, and that's what Genesis is like. And I thought it was such an interesting image that he had. One of our agents, an author's agent, says Genesis makes an emotional connection and it tells stories about great lives. So these ideas really helped us to think about who we were as people. And then we worked with a designer, much like yourselves, to come up with a logo for our company. And I don't know if you're familiar with this image. Do you know? Yeah. So Storm Thorgerson was a friend of mine. He's the designer who came up with that image. Sadly, he's just passed away. But we spoke to Storm about could he come up with a logo for us. And I thought as design students you'd like to see some of his very first ideas. They're very rough, just sketches.
I just want to say also that Storm wasn't known for visual identity for organizations. He was known for product packaging. So this is a challenge to a designer like him to solve a problem like this.
And I'll be honest, a lot of our decisions we make are based on relationships. And do you feel that you're working with someone who understands you? And we felt that Storm understood what we were trying to do. So he produced hundreds of sketches to find out what we thought about Genesis, you know, who we thought we were and what kind of work we did. And he eventually came up with this logo of the man stepping out of the book, and maybe it's the author, maybe with a big story to tell. Or maybe it's the reader discovering a whole world they didn't know about before they bought the book. But it translates really well onto all of our books, and it can be blocked in black and white, or it can be displayed in colour like that. So we're pretty happy with the result. So that today we're trying to see where we can take the Genesis brand, where else it can go. And just as 500 years ago, there was this print revolution happening here. Today, there's a digital communication revolution, and every book publisher is thinking, how are we going to move into this digital world? Now, I don't know if we ever will. We might stay doing what we're doing, but it's fun to experiment. That's what we feel. It's fun to try. So when an author came to us recently and said, can you make an ebook for the iPad? We said, sure. And we're really finding out if our design skills can carry over into this new area. And it's been really, really exciting. And the author is a very famous rock and roll musician. But it doesn't really matter who it is, because for us it's about producing our first digital book.
Don't tell us who it is.
I really wanted, we have this big agreement with iTunes, and we have to announce it next
so I'm
Wednesday.
going to tell you by exclusion. It's neither John Lennon, George Harrison, or Paul McCartney.
Go figure. So I started by saying that I was thinking about the brand as a story, and I finished with this quote from Umberto Eco. And for him, he says, in this modern world that we live in, stories need to be open. They're never finished. And every person who reads it has their own story, because they interpret things in new ways. And perhaps we're better to leave a little bit of the work unfinished, to just see what new possibilities we come up with. And I really like this way of thinking about a business as being creative and trying new things. So it's been helpful to me, but I'd love to hear your comments and questions you have.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, I'm sure you have a lot of questions for Nick about everything from how he works with his authors to the notion of narrative, because narrative is obviously a big part of the Genesis brand. It's about a story being told, but he's introduced something in his last slide that I want you to think about. A lot of the notion of his company's brand is built on the idea of a story that doesn't have an ending yet. And it's a very open-ended concept. So how can we have a narrative where the ending hasn't been written? That's the essential conundrum of this. And I also want to go back, when we're ready, and talk a little bit about the idea of whether this company is well served or not with a visual brand, a logo. See, I talked to you about quiet brands, and essentially Genesis was a quiet brand. So their strategy for meeting the competitive arena was to apply a visual brand to each of their products. But their brand was built on no logo. So is it in opposition to their heritage? Are they suddenly defying their heritage? Or is one of the middle chapter of the Genesis story one where they do attach a visual brand in order to say who they are? Who has questions? Anyone? Is everybody easy to work with?
No. I mean, we're always challenged. So by easy, if we mean, does everyone accept everything we do? No. Because when you submit a proposal, sometimes people, they might think it's the worst idea. So the question is, what do you do if you present that? And someone says, why is this any good? How do you answer that question if somebody says to you, to your work, they say, why should I look at this? Why is this helpful to me? Do you have that situation in class? Do you have criticism, where you have to present your work? If we find if we have a story to tell, if there's a reason behind what we've done, and it's well grounded, and we've really thought about why we've made a design a certain way, that people respect that, and that even if they disagree, they can see that you've thought hard about what you're trying to do. And that counts for a lot. So that if our authors, even the most demanding ones, they feel like you've respected their work, and you're trying to respect who they are, then even if they don't necessarily like your work, they're grateful that you've spent that time. Does that make sense?
So it sounds like a brand that places a lot of emphasis on relationships. You showed a diagram of all the different stakeholders. With each separate group, the brand has to have a clear relationship.
Yeah.
And I think also, one other thing is that this is a family-owned business. This probably is more understandable to you who live in Italy, because many of the great businesses in Italy are family businesses. You're second generation. And there's a story in your story. I mean, the story of the Genesis brand is as interesting as the stories that you communicate through the product you create. So the notion of narrative is hyper-present in everything this company does.
How much does the book cost?
About £300. So what are we talking about? €400.
400 euros, average price for the book.
It's like a piece of art.
Yeah.
It is a piece of art.
Painting on it's not.
Yeah.
It's really art.
Yeah, it's something to be treasured and to keep. It's so you don't see many of them being sold again on eBay or but when they do sell, they sell for thousands of euros, and we try not to charge. There are other people making similar books, and they maybe charge 2,000 euros, but we try to charge a price that reflects the work, and not to just use the brand as an excuse to charge too much money.
Don't your books also always sell out? You sell through on all the titles.
Yeah, although we've made 100 books, there's maybe 50 that you can buy today, and every time we publish, every year, another one sells out. So we're gaining a new edition and then we lose one. And so some people collect all of them, they want to buy them all. So it's a very different way of thinking about publishing, because you're not thinking about reprinting next year with new content. It's you just do it once, and so anyway, it's quite like creating something like a bit of art.
I think also that these books are not sold by persuasion. In other words, there's not the intervention of conventional advertising that tries to persuade you you've got to have one of these. You have a loyal base of collectors and of distributors who recognize the inherent value of the objects you produce.
Yeah, and as you say, the relationship and trust is so important, and that's why all the design materials that are filtered through are so important, because they have to reflect the spirit of the work. So that people know they can trust that if they're seeing a book, they don't think, wow, 400 euros, is this some sort of rip-off? It has to sort of convey what's going on. They have to be able to see that Nicola and Giuseppe made it by hand. They have to see all that. So the design is really important.
The deep notion of craft is present in every book. So there is by the nature of the production, the implication of value. The value is present. It's a very interesting business model because it's not your traditional marketing model at all. They don't go out to the marketplace and say, here's the product. It's in many ways the market waits for what you come up with. What's the latest from Genesis this year?
And there's no barcode.
And there's no barcode.
So very few businesses anymore that have a barcode. Even when I was selling to Bloomingdale's very small production, they have to have a barcode. So by not having a barcode, you're already backwards.
What we're talking about here also, yes, go ahead, of course.
So do you take the information from the artist? Where do you take the information from the artist? Like from an interview or deep research?
Yeah, that's a really good question because sometimes it's very different. So to be honest with David Bowie, I'd be lying if I said we met up every Tuesday and had coffee together. It's just by email, and then we send samples over to New York. But Jimmy Page, he saw my sister every day for 30, 60 days in a row. Very involved, wanting to know about the line length, the type, why are we using that typeface, everything, because he liked the art, So it depends. Every client, I guess, is different.
What's your favorite book? What's your favorite book of Genesis?
My favorite book is a book called California Dreaming, which we made with this photographer called Henry Diltz. That's how I met Stanley. I was a good friend of Stanley's. And my wife was his assistant. So that's how we met as well. So that's my favorite book.
What about the visual brand, Sasha? You want to talk about that a little bit? Bring your expertise to it or ask some questions? Do you think it was a good idea for Genesis to go and get a visual brand?
I'm still not sure. Yeah, because on the other hand, every book has its own kind of identity, so it breaks it up a little bit. So. But I like the visual part of it. It's like the Trussardi dog, or there's the man in the book, the man on the moon, and Dark Side of the Moon. So I like it.
We try to just place it very discreetly.
Yeah.
We're always inspired.
I think it's very interesting that you selected a literal mark, a mark of a man stepping out of a book. You essentially told your story in a signet without, were you going to say that? You essentially told the story of your brand in a signet, if not a printed word. It doesn't say Genesis within it. It's a man walking out of a book. So here's another way of using a signet to deliver narrative. Could just as easily have been a blob, an amorphous shape, or it could have been a G and a P, Genesis Publications. There are many, many different approaches to it. And yet, if the visual brand is to accurately express the values and spirit of the organization, this in many ways it's a very clear and accurate statement of who they are. It's a story and a narrative. So I think in that sense it's a good visual solution for Genesis personally. It's representational to them. I'm going to be sending you an article, a difficult article this week called About Naming, about how to name a company. And I'm going to ask you to study it. In fact, in June we're going to talk about that. And in many ways, this is sort of the same question as how to identify visually an organization. I told you about that exercise that I often do with a client where I say, First, I'm going to talk you into the idea. I'm going to persuade you that it's a good idea, and then I'm going to tell you why it's a bad idea. Well, for you to have a visual brand is a good idea because it does place your mark on each of your products so that it can track back to you without being something anonymous to its maker in the universe. With a luxury brand, we often talk about the scratch, the unique mark of the maker. And that's one thing that characterizes a luxury brand in the world, is that sense of it being unique to its maker. The idea of it being something special and of unto itself, not a mass-produced item. While they do make 1,000 copies, that's not a lot in the universe of bookmaking. Like a best-selling book selling 1 million copies. You know, the difference between 1,000 and 1 million is profound. So to have created a visual icon to go with the product in the best sense is a good idea. In the worst sense, he has nullified, he has gotten rid of the tradition of the first 15 or 20 years of the company, which was to create an object of beauty taken unto itself without any other value than that to track back to the company, to the parent. So, what does the logo do now? Well, the one thing that I think it does do is it contextualizes the product in time. It tells you at what time the book was made in the organization's life. So that is another function of a brand. And it's something that I haven't got in my book, it's kind of something that's just come up. That is, that it roots the product in time, historically. It gives it some historical connection. And you can be the detective and you can look at how the book is made. You can analyze the iconography, you can analyze the materials, you can analyze the subject matter. All of that tells you something historically about the book. But I think that the brand signature on them also tells you something historically. So, in the worst sense, it threw out the heritage of anonymity. In the best sense, it gave you a sense of history, of where it stands in the life of the organization. So which is more important? And the ultimate measure of the importance is right there. It's the organization itself. Because what these signatures, what these signets represent is how the organization sees itself. That's the first measure. You know, organizations, they live within a wall. And before any kind of product is sent out into the world, the organization has to understand something about itself and its nature, about what it stands for, about what it values, about how it wants to be seen, about what it wants to communicate. It's sort of in the way cities grow, the same kind of word would be, it's exothermal. It goes outward. It goes outward. So, but if you don't know what you stand for internally to begin with, then you're confused. You send out a message of no message or a message of confusion. It's a very coherent way of talking about your brand.
Stanley. It also, having the actual symbol on the products, it's the first time that Genesis is starting to branch out and do things like ebooks. Mm-hmm. And they're also doing like large format photographic prints. So it's the first time that it's taken from just being a book into passing on the information in a different format. So I think it also allows the company to move ahead into different formats and still be recognizable.
So it's a bit of a device that signals an evolution of the company. Remember too this thing about brand extensions, that you have a core product by which your brand is known, but sometimes you want to, you know, Armani has got first it's clothing, but then it's eyeglasses, and then it's a fragrance, and then it's timepieces. So this is much the same as what Genesis is doing, but in a very, very selective way. Electronic books as opposed to printed books or large format print. So yeah, it's another way of creating the scratch. Good. No. Is there a place in the world today for artisan books? You know? You think that, is this an obsolete commodity?
Can you repeat again?
Is a book, a printed bound book, a work in a slipcover, an obsolete commodity for the world today? Do you think we're dealing with like, sorry?
I don't understand.
You don't understand? Is it because there's going to be fewer and fewer books made in the world as the years go on? There's too many dead trees.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
I think there are.
I don't think
there
they
are
know.
more books, but
Use
not
it.
that much print on. But
Oh, okay. So you think there's going to be more books printed, but nowhere near in the large quantities that are done before?
not that much.
Number of titles, not the number of copies. That's interesting. You know, we started, Paul and I started a digital publishing company last year. We already came up with 12 titles. 12 books on demand publishing. So the new publishing model is not like the way it used to be. You take it, you write your book, you take it to an agent, your agent would show it around to publishers, they'd all reject you. Your agent would tell you, change this, you change it, and then you get rejected again, and finally, by begging, the best would be published. Or not even the best, just whatever got chosen. The new model is, I open up, sorry,
The virtual book. What about the virtual book?
the virtual.
I don't like. I think there is no poetry. There is no.
Well,
It's completely different.
let me point out to you also that you're using the word book much like the way we used to use the word friend. What was your friend?
Yes.
Your friend was somebody you could reach out and touch and have a conversation with and sit down with, have dinner with. And now it's somebody you push a button and say accept. Somebody who's never met you, who wants to send you marketing. The same book.
It's sad, I think.
Ah, it's sad.
Do you think that an electronic book can be made good?
For me, no.
I believe they can. Because, you know, when I hear their stories, more or less for me, is you see a passion in what they are doing. So when they are doing this, even in the electronic world, they love what they're doing, I think the result can be excellent.
Yes, I need to touch them.
Who believes an electronic book can be passionate? Oh, okay.
I think it's interesting because you can link it with other media. You know, I love books. And I had never read a book on a screen.
I've tried.
I'm with you. But I think because they are not, probably that we think they are not that good electronic books, the potential is there.
I can see why you're saying what you're saying, and the designer, Stanley, who worked with since like the late 1980s, designed a lot of our books. And Nikki at first said, "Oh God, didn't want to do it in an electronic book." Now she's saying, "When we do the next one," she
Well,
really.
that's so interesting.
And I was interested to see whether, to be honest, if there hadn't been a good, I don't know what the expression is, but a good atmosphere doing that in the office, maybe we wouldn't have done it.
Is there a way of making an electronic book more precious along the lines of your limited edition book?
We're having fun, like buying all different. The look of the book is very archival, so we bought lots of old photo albums from flea markets and from things like that, and then we can scan all the textures. and then using those as the backgrounds, the page backgrounds, so to try and bring some of the tactile nature into the book.
Footnote, Steve Jobs was absolutely, utterly critical about the textures and the backgrounds that he created for the Macintosh and for the iPad. Wood grain for the bookshelf and things like that. So in many ways you are supporting that idea, is that electronic surfaces can have unique qualities. There can be some impression of a unique quality of electronic surfaces. There you go.
I don't know, we'll see. It's kind of like an experiment. It could be like the worst thing in the world. You have to find out. And if it is, I probably won't be giving a presentation about it next year. I'll be telling you a different kind of a story, I guess. But hopefully it is, and it's for charity, and hopefully it'll raise a lot of money. But it's a good time to just see, because an author said, I'd like this to happen. So, because we've been thinking about it already, we made the decision a bit easier.
So this is kind of similar to that absolute bottle that I posted on the web, on the Facebook page, because it is a cause-related project. Cause-related, so that it's linked to fundraising for a charity. It's another way of viewing a commodity. And here's the perfect illustration of a quiet brand that got a little bit noisier with their logo, but is still upholding the same standards. They're not being aggressive. Being aggressive. More questions for Nick? Got a guy who's making art books for the world today.
You have made this choice about not the quantity but the quality, and this is the policy of your family, right? Right?
Yeah.
And respect for this. Only this is a very good thing and courageous thing, I think.
Thank you.
It was not a question.
It was my father was really dispirited, like disappointed working in mass market publishing, where you have to publish 100 books in the spring, and you have about 5 minutes to spend on every book. And there's no care. It's difficult to go into the care.
So the books you create are like friends. You have a lifetime relationship with them.
Yeah, and because they continue to be in a part by the series.
I also think that working in a very don't get me wrong, a narrow universe, or let's say a very narrow niche, is another way to invigorate your products with value and meaning. Because you're specializing, you're a specialist in many ways. You wouldn't do a book about glassware company, or something like that. You really are working in a very select, specific universe, and by being a specialist, that makes the output unique and valuable too.
I had a question.
Yeah.
If he has a logo, and this is only because of your situation, this question's coming up, and I think it's really an interesting question. If he now has a logo, does he have to use it on everything? Could he just use it on his business card and his ebooks or posters, but not put it on the book?
That's a strategic question.
That's a question I would have.
Okay, you want to answer that one?
Well, yes, I think you could do that.
You mean be selected in the placement of this?
Of course.
So if you have a logo, you don't have to use it.
You're not obliged to. I mean, in some cases, it's probably advisable.
Okay.
A lot of publishers have that kind of strategy. They own the book. They are in another. They see the book as another thing, it's more the author, so they are under the author's direction.
Often too, they will create a sub-brand for a particular category, like this publishing house will have a mystery category, sub-brand. But in answer to your question, from my perspective, it all depends, it depends on the product. I think it depends on the product and the category. If indeed there is value to be added from tracking the product back to the origin, much like this idea of Unilever, putting their brand on every package, no matter what it is. See, it has to do with brand architecture. That's the question. The question about brand architecture. If I want to know who the origin is, then yes, it's critical that it go on every product. If I want the product to be taken unto itself, then it's not so critical. And then there's also the idea of the quiet brand, the invisible brand, where I don't really, all I know is the productness of the product. Like, you said something in your, you said something in your the anus of the A. Yeah, because like what Socrates said, he said the thinginess of the thing. This is like the productness of the product. Is that what's really important? Is that more important than the parent, than the originator of it, where it came from? And that's, I guess, the conundrum, isn't it? That's the question, is how much do I want to be known for what I do?
Even you can change the form of logo.
Like
I mean,
MTV,
it's like MTV, kind of.
the flexible brand.
It just has to be a man walking over
Sometimes
the
it's
book.
just a man, yeah, it's easy to block.
And I guess also with these brand extensions, as soon as you get into brand extensions, which have to track back to a parent, then it becomes, the signet becomes utilitarian, and it adds value to whatever it adds to your product mix. You're not going too far out of the universe of what you've been preparing before. You've been providing a book, and you're providing an ebook, you're providing some unique, limited edition
They
visual.
always say something about the brand of, say, Dick Boat, even just a photo of him in a frame. It's just a really, it says something about him at that moment in time. Maybe it's in 1972 when he was Ziggy Stardust. But you see that one image and right away you think of the song or that album, and look at the fashion. So even just that one image tells you the story about him. And the ebook tells you that story. They're just all different things of saying something about him.
I think too it'll be interesting to hear how this ebook goes and whether you want to go further with them or not, what you find, because it is such an untested medium. Really, it's quite early in the life of this. And so what we're seeing is we're seeing a transformation of literacy and of the vehicles of literacy. It's a bit like the new era of Gutenberg. It's the new Gutenberg. So it's very early, and it hasn't been developed that much. The potential, of course, like you were talking about tracking back to other things, referencing, what they call hyperlinks. Hyperlinks. I just read about that. What was it? The one about the Rolling Stones, which all these hyperlinks. Somebody's name comes up, and you click on the name, and it takes you to an article about somebody who's not even in the book itself. This is the potential of electronic publishing, the ability to cross-reference. Of course, and the downside is that you can go so far away from the work that you're visiting as to almost lose the sense of where you started. It's like when you get stuck surfing the net. At first you Google an image, and then you find out who that was, and then you see it attached to a blog, and then you read the blog, and you say, oh, what's this, Umberto Eco? I'm going to go there. But by the end of your search, you're nowhere near, you were looking for a recipe for pasta, and you wound up in like semiotic philosophy. So, I think the other thing is that the potential for losing focus is as good as the potential for doing something good for the world. Information is structured differently today. Questions? Comments? Okay.
Okay, well, thanks very much. I hope it's helpful. I hope in a way thinking about working with authors is kind of similar to thinking about working with clients.
Where can your books be seen here in Verona or Milan?
In Milan, in Corsa Como, it's like a fashion store, and they have on the 4th floor, they have a book.
Doesn't Armani have a bookstore that you would be a place for it?
Yeah,
Okay, how are we doing here? Let's see what time it is. It's 5:15. Is it? Where are you? Are you in Fiji? All right, we've got 45 minutes more, or not. What do we think? Do we want to ask some more questions? Do you want to dialogue or talk to people? Do you want to talk about the course assignment for a few minutes? Does everyone understand the assignment? Ladies and gentlemen. Okay, you're going to make, first of all, you're going to make teams of at least 4 people, 4 or more on a team. And everybody, each team has to make a video, 2 minutes long. No longer. That's it. All you get is 2 minutes. All right? And I gave you 3 different clients. You have to choose a client. You have to choose the University of California. You have to choose Hostess Twinkies. Or you have to choose the end of the world. Whichever is interesting to you. And I'm not telling you that you don't have to build a coherent visual brand in the graphic standard. You can build, for me, a conceptual approach. You can develop an idea, or you can tell me how you want to transform the attitude about it. But I want it to be really interesting. Also, I wrote to the designer at the University of California yesterday, and I asked her, I said, I'm going to assign the University of California to my students. Would you like to see the solution? So here's an opportunity also to send a message to them. If not, I'm very happy to do it. In fact, I'm really happy to do it. In fact, I would love to send that, a video about your ideas to them. Questions? Come on, talk to me. All right, here's the deal. Next week, in class, I'm going to meet with each team and see what your progress is. Each team is going to sit with me at a table, and you're going to ask me questions or show me what you're thinking, and start to make the path to the finish line. We'll do it next week, we'll do it the week after. And on the last day of class, each shows a video. And then we're going to have an expert, another expert from the Medding Group. By the way, I didn't mention that Sascha is a member of the Medding Group, the think tank. And then on June 1st, we have another director of the Medding Group coming. And the last day, we have a really hard critic who's going to criticize each of your videos. So get ready. Question? Question? Understand the assignment? Yeah? All right. At least 4. The reason that is that I want at least 6 teams. I want at least 2 solutions, 2 teams for each client. That's my object. My object is to get at least 2 different solutions for each client. How are you going to brand the end of the world? Are we going to make people like it? Are you going to make people hate it? Were the Mayans right? That one to me is the most interesting because it's kind of the difficult one. You have to say to yourself, like, what precisely, it's almost like a political campaign, that one. Hostess Twinkies, that's about a consumer product. Now, and I think you saw today a lot about the University of California. So I think you're getting a sense of what that might require. But please, open your minds and be a little bit, have some fun, of course. I want you to have fun. But I want it to be a bit of an adventure for you. Take a chance on that one. You don't have to be conventional. Please don't be conventional. Please have an adventure. Okay? Did you all look at the salt bass reel? Exactly.
Sorry. I don't understand that I must do.
What have you been learning in 2 classes? What is a brand? Yeah, you have to make a 2-minute video. Yes. What must you say? You're asking me what you have to say? No. I asked you to say. You're the doctor. Demon, tell me. Talk Italian. You need. Yeah, sure. Come on. Somebody's going to translate for me.
Devo scegliere questi 3 temi, uno dei 3 temi.
You are rebranding one of those 3 clients. You're giving me a new brand solution. You have to approach it as a brand. You better talk to your friends. Whatever your ideas are, I want to know them. It could be anything. I mean, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I have an open mind. Right? You have to be able to talk about it in that video.
She can use it what she wants.
Yes?